Hey guys, I found a great opportunity for you to put your creative skills to good use. There is a global campaign called Glowing Gone that uses creativity to raise awareness to climate change affecting the coral reefs around the world. In a desperate attempt to survive increasing ocean temperature, some corals glow in vibrant color. They produce brightly colored chemicals in their flesh that act as a sunscreen, as a final attempt to survive. It is rare that something looks the most beautiful just before it dies, which makes this one of the most disturbingly spectacular sights in nature. It is almost as if the ocean is giving us a final visual warning to take action. You can show your support by joining this challenge and submit your creative work by the 3rd of September, with a chance of it being used on digital billboards at Times Square and WeTransfer's wallpapers. As if the fires in the Amazon rainforest wasn't enough, unfortunately there's other crisis happening at the same time to the natural environment. And the Glowing Gone challenge is something that we creatives can join and hopefully do something about these changes, or at least raise awareness. So the challenge itself is to create a composition or design using purely a set of colors, 3 colors in this case. And these 3 colors you can find specified in the brief if you download it from the website glowing.org. So you can see them here. It's a very vivid blue, purple, and yellow. The main restriction of this challenge is that you need to use these colors purely. You can use black and white, but the colors has to be only these 3 colors or a combination of them. And of course you can use them as gradients as well, but you have to be careful how you use them. So here you can see the new feature in CC 2019, the freeform gradient is used to create these little pins in Illustrator. But if you use this feature, for example, you have to make sure that there's no greens showing up. The right order of the colors is also important. But in this video, what I'm going to show you is using this brief and using some assets from Adobe stock. I will put together very quickly a composition, and hopefully this can encourage you to also do the same and help raise awareness about this issue. So once you go to the website, go to Get Involved, and under there you will find for creatives the brief. So once you download that, you will get a lot of assets. And in fact, I can show you, there's the PDF, which I showed you briefly. Then there's the assets like the colors, which you can just double click on and it immediately opens up in Adobe applications. So it will show up in your swatches. Then there is also gradients that you can apply and just overlay onto images. If you want, you can use your own photographs as well, of course. There is an action for a gradient map, which I will be using in this example. There's all kinds of versions of the logo for the Glowing Gone, even animated version of it if you are planning to create an animation or video. And there's also some patterns here. Plus, when you download this pack, you will also get some free Adobe stock photos. So these are really high quality imagery and you can work with them. So even if you don't have access to Adobe stock and you don't have license to use for this project, you can always use these free assets that you get from the challenge. And here's some examples of the action, which creates a gradient map in Photoshop applied onto photographs. As you can see, that's the main limitation on the challenge, that you have to make sure that these are the only colors used in your designs. So as I said, you can use black and white besides these, but the original colors of the photograph shouldn't show. It has to be a mixture of these colors, the blue, purple, and yellow. Now, I went to Adobe stock and I've done some research before I started recording this video. And I wanted to find images that I will be able to use in my composition. And I decided to do a portrait mixed with an underwater scene. So you can see I have lots of portraits here from which I have chosen one that I'm going to work with. But I always like to keep several versions because while I'm working and putting together a composition, I keep changing my mind. And the cool thing about Adobe stock is that you can easily have as many assets saved as you want You already can start working, even masking, using adjustment layers in Photoshop, but you don't have to pay anything. You can decide to license at the very end of your workflow. So you will see exactly how that works. Once I switch to Photoshop, you can see an example here that I started, and this is close to what I wanted to create, but let me show you how I started the whole thing from scratch. So here's a blank new document. I'm using the libraries panel from where I can just simply drag and drop assets into my composition. So let's start with this portrait, and I actually already licensed this one. So when I drag and drop this in, it doesn't have the watermark anymore on it, and obviously it's a high resolution image. So if I zoom closer, you can see it's very detailed, but this is licensed. Now let's compare this to another asset, which is not licensed yet, like this coral. So if I drag and drop that one in, you will see that this has a watermark on it if I zoom closer, and also the number of the asset itself. The cool thing about working with Adobe Stock is that you can, as I said, already start doing things like masking. So for example, in this case, if I just select the magic wand with the option, it's called contiguous. If you remove that, that means it will be able to find details even in between the corals. You can see here some gaps are also identified, and I think it's done a quite good selection, so I'm happy with that. Now if I click on the mask icon here at the bottom right, it turns this into a mask, but because I clicked on the background, it selects the opposite part, or keeps the white details visible and the other one hidden. You can use Command I or Control I to invert your mask colors, so the black and white is getting inverted. What you can also do is, when you create your masks, the background selected, instead of just simply clicking on this icon, if you hold down the Option or Alt key, it's going to create an inverted mask. So it keeps the selected parts hidden and the deselected parts, in case the coral, visible. Now that I have the mask, I can just use the brush tool, and with white I can paint over some parts where I feel like it wasn't necessary to have gaps. So I think around the edges it's good to have the gaps, but these parts, no, these parts are actually already gaps, and those are gaps as well. Yeah, I think the rest is fine as it is. These can be filled in as well, I think. And then there is something here which I'm not sure. So I'm just going to press X on the keyboard and just remove some details there. And I can also remove this number for now. So this is still a watermarked image. But what's good about it is when I start moving it around, I can already see it in context, so I can start matching it to the other image. And also another useful thing is that it's a smart object. It's a cloud-based smart object, which means that once this asset is licensed, it will update and it will become high resolution, but keeping the mask intact and all the adjustments that I'm going to do with it and transformations. So what I'm going to do first of all is to add the background color here. I'm going to change the background to a darker color. So I'm just going to use the solid color adjustment layer, and I'm going to pick a darker blue color, something like this for now, just so we can see our details better. I'm going to come a bit closer, and I will use the free transform tool and increase the size of the coral, and also I'm going to start rotating it around. Now I'm going to actually use this one here on the right side, something like that. So you can see the theme I'm going for is replacing the hair with the coral details, and holding down Command or Control I can distort this smart object as well to get the right shape. Something like that I think will work for now. Okay, now sometimes when you are using a pixel mask, you might notice these little thin pixels around the edges. That's because of using the magic wand, unfortunately, and because we had anti-alias on the magic wand that creates this artifact. The easiest way to get rid of it is to use the brush tool. If you forgot to remove the option, you can just use the brush tool, and with black you can paint around the edges quickly and that will solve that issue. So you can see now it's not showing up anywhere. But because this is just a mock-up, we could always refine that later. So I'm not really concerned about things at the beginning. So already at this point, I feel like the whole detail is going to be a little bit too big. So I'm going to reduce the size. You have to be careful in CC 2019. You have to remember not to hold down the shift key anymore. I'm still holding it down most of the time and then I let go. In this case, I'm holding down the option key or alt key to resize this selection to its center point. But in previous versions, we had to hold down shift key. Now you don't have to hold it anymore to keep it in proportions or keep the proportions intact. So I'm just going to keep it something like that size. All right. Press enter to accept that change. And now we can start popping in the other details. So let's just drag and drop another asset in here. And also I put another one, a third one in there, like so. And now I'm going to use the same method, something like that. I will actually use the anti-alias because it just creates a little bit more subtle selection around the edges. And then turn that into a mask. Select the other one as well with the same method, like so. And I'm just going to quickly remove these numbers and then align these. Now, I'm going to use command square brackets to move that coral on the top behind. So there it goes in the background. And then this other one here on the left. By the way, I'm switching between layers using a shortcut. The command or control key while using the move tool can easily switch between layers. You can see as I'm holding down the command or control key on PC and clicking on details, I'm switching between the layers very quickly. It's the auto select feature, which I don't keep turned on because then accidentally I start moving things around. I prefer to be in control by using the shortcut instead. So now that I have that in place, I can rotate it slightly a bit more and I can use even features like the puppet warp tool. If I go to edit, puppet warp, to define some pinpoints and then starting dragging details around like this one here, we can move it down. Now here's an interesting thing. When you use puppet warp, and you already have a mask on a smart object, the puppet warp will only affect the image and not the mask. So what you can do in these cases is to wrap the whole thing into another smart object. So right click, choose convert to smart object, and then apply the puppet warp, because then both the mask and the image is going to be affected. So now I can put these pinpoints down and I can start moving it down. So you can see now the mask is also affected. So I can just quickly create a little bit more of the shape that I wanted on that side. And then I press enter to accept these changes. But the good thing about puppet warp is because we are working with a smart object, it's a non-destructive adjustment. So I can always turn it off, or turn it back on. So it's here in the layers panel. You can see without and with it. And if I double click on puppet warp, I can find these points and make changes to them. I'm planning to do another video on comparing puppet warp to liquify filter in Photoshop, because I can see a lot of people are not utilizing this tool, and I actually personally prefer it to liquify in most cases. So now you can see how I would start working. Maybe one more quick selection would be on the portrait, but because it's a fairly easy background, on that I can just use this subject option. So select subject, would select the portrait, and then we just turn that into a mask. There it is. And then I think we can just get rid of that little line there, so it's not affecting us. Okay, now one last thing before we go any further is to make sure that the colors are using the colors from the challenge. So the 3 colors, that limited color palette. So as I said, it's saved as an action, which is here already. I imported it. Once you download the brief, you can just double click on that icon and it will load into the actions panel in Photoshop. And then you just select the action and click play. And then it's going to create the gradient map for you. So There you go, it shows up here on the top, and I can turn it off, turn it back on, and you can see how the colors work. Now, of course, if you want to refine this, you can. You don't have to use it exactly the way it was used. So for example, if I wanted to make it a little bit darker, less vivid as this, I could get rid of the white color, move the yellow all the way to the right, and already you see it's getting more subtle, because now the yellow is set to be the brightest color, so nothing can be brighter than that. So the original white becomes yellow, and then if I wanted the purple to be the mid-tone, I can set it exactly in the middle, and then blue is going to represent shadow in this case. So no matter what colors you have, they will all be replaced by these three colors and the transitions between them. But you can always come back and refine the transition. So I can maybe move this further down or further up as well. And you can see it changes quite a lot how this photograph is going to look like. I actually quite like something like that. Maybe the yellow can come a bit further down. Actually, I like it all the way on the top. So once again, before and after. So that already is a quite interesting composition, especially once we put in some water detail in the background. Let's say this one. I'm just going to drag and drop another asset. This is also licensed, so this one doesn't have the watermark on it. I'm going to just make it slightly bigger and then drop it here at the bottom. There you go. Already looks like it's underwater. So I just love the fact that with stock assets, you can very quickly play around, placing details. And if, for example, if you don't like something, let's say I wanted to find a similar image, but not the current one for the underwater detail, I could just right click here and choose find similar. And it's going to find similar photos, but you can even filter all kinds of other assets. But as you can see, it's done a really good job, and it gives me so many different options here. I can find probably ones with fish in it as well, and so on and so forth. But I'm just going to go back and clear this search. And instead, I'm going to show you also how licensing would work. If I zoom onto one of these corals, let's say this one here on the right, I just command click on it and then right click on the layer, choose license image. It comes up with this little dialog box, and then I can just simply say, okay, I want to use one of my available credits on this. If I confirm that, it will be immediately updating here. So it will remove the watermark and it becomes a high resolution image. So the cool thing is that it keeps the selection or the mask and also all the adjustments that we apply to it. And I can go and refine the details on it if I wanted to from this point. So that's just a little demonstration of how Adobe Stock works in relation with the libraries panel. Usually when you work in an agency, you would have an allowance for a certain amount of credits. If you are a freelancer, it can be a little bit more pricey to use stock assets, but Adobe Stock gives you 10 free images to start with. So that's completely free just to test it out. So even if you don't want to pay for it and you want to see how Adobe Stock works, that's something you can do. But going back to the challenge, it's very important that the deadline is very soon. So you only have roughly around a week from the day when this video is published. Unfortunately, I couldn't create this video earlier, but at least you still have a week to put something together. And as you can see, I already managed to create something very quickly in like 10-15 minutes. So just spend around an hour and create a little composition, put it together, because there is a chance that your work can be seen on Times Square digital billboards and also on the WeTransfer wallpapers. Of course, this is not a contest where you get paid or you win something. It's really all about raising awareness, but also as a creative, you can get some exposure from it if your work gets featured. So I highly recommend you to join this creative challenge and try to create a unique and impactful design. Let us know in the comment section what would you like us to cover next time on this series. Click on the link in the description or the join button to become a member if you want to work on future projects with us and see the whole design or illustration process live. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.